Hey guys, and welcome to my review of A Local Habitation by Seanan McGuire, the second book in the Toby Daye series. This is a series about Toby Daye, who is a half fairy and half human, and she is a knight for a local fae kingdom. And in this particular book, she has been asked by her liege lord to go check on his niece. His niece is in charge of a little fiefdom that also happens to be a tech company out in Fremont. She's supposed to check in. He hasn't heard from her. He's worried if he goes, he'll cause a political incident. Please, Toby, go. And so she says, of course, and of course not there. It's people are being murdered. So this is a series that I am in the middle of rereading, and so because of that, I do break up my reviews into three different sections. The first section is my non-spoilery thoughts. The second section is thoughts that are spoilery for just this book, and then the third section is thoughts that are spoilery for the whole series. So where as much as you've read, you can just kind of decide how much of this video you want to watch. But let's go ahead and jump right into my non-spoilery thoughts. And my first and biggest thought about this book is it is so much better than the first one. It's just better quality. The first book was very clearly a debut novel. This one is just a step up. Everything is just better. So that's really, really good. And so it's just, it's so overwhelming. So I was very pleased to see that because it was very rough to read that first book. Talking about world building, the world building was not quite so clunky as it was in the first book, probably because she did lay that really solid foundation in the first book, and now she's just adding bits and pieces. But it also means that she doesn't have these really crazy info dumps or which was understandable she had to do in the first book because there's so much to know, but now it's already been established, so she can just add to it. And so it just felt so much better. It felt much more in balance with the rest of the book. And I do think that the world is interesting, but I think a lot of the stuff that we were introduced to in this book was a little bit more utilitarian world building things we're going to need to know, but not necessarily things that piqued my interest. So if I seem a little lackluster, that's kind of why. It was good. It just wasn't anything that I was super excited to see. But I really like that we got it. I know that it's going to be really useful. It's going to come in handy because basically everything in these books come back at some point. And in some ways, I'm very interested to see exactly how some of this information comes back. The plot itself was, if you're going into this expecting a murder mystery, it's terrible. So don't go in expecting a murder mystery because that's really not what it's about. It's really about the trials and tribulations of Toby Daye. And the murder mystery itself is a little bit simplistic. You might be able to figure out who done it, but again, that's not really the point of this book. The point is essentially Toby has been asked to do this thing. How does she attack the problem? How does she handle other people? All that kind of stuff. And I actually really liked that. And even the murder mystery itself was more interesting this time around. I still don't love it. I don't think it's a bad storyline by any stretch of the imagination. But when I think about all the books in this series, it's not my favorite. It was better than the last book, but it's good. It's just not amazing or great, which is a little bit sad because there are so many great storylines in this series. So that's why I'm a little bit lackluster on that one too, but that's why. It is a good storyline as long as you go into it knowing that it's not a murder mystery. But things got a lot better once I realized that I disliked all of our side characters that were part of this tech company. So they are people who are part of the fiefdom, and I just kind of wanted to shake them. They kept wandering off alone, even after Toby said, "Don't wander alone. There's a murderer walking around killing you guys. Don't go by yourself." And then they just do. I was like, you guys can't even follow basic horror movie safety precautions. Like, seriously? And so the characters themselves were interesting, but not people that I like. And so once I admitted that to myself, things got a lot better. There are some of the side characters that we met in the first book make another appearance, but most of them, they don't play a big role. The two biggest characters that we kind of see in this book are Toby and Quentin. And Toby, oh my goodness, even just from the first scene. So the first scene, Toby is walking home with her friends because they had a ladies' night out and they were slightly drunk. And then she sees them off to the train station, the BART station. And then Tybalt comes along and Toby's she's not being very effective at taking care of herself. So he just picks her up and takes her home. She pulls down her wards and he takes her inside. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, there's been so much growth in the last 6 months, because in the timeline, there's 6 months between the end of the first book and the second book. So Toby is not isolating herself. She reached out to her friends. She's seeing her friends. She's willing to go out and have a night of fun. Her relationship with Tybalt has evolved to the point where she trusts him enough to take down her wards. She trusts him enough to let him carry her. This is such amazing growth, and we didn't even see the growth part happen. And then even through this book, we get to see how she kind of thinks now, and how it's changed a little bit now that she's not quite so deeply in the throes of her depression. And it's very, very interesting to see. Likewise, Quentin has also evolved in the last 6 months. He's very much a kid. He still has some really interesting ideas that he learned growing up in his own household that Toby is very clearly trying to systematically dismantle. And I think it's very cool to especially watch them interact. Toby very definitely has laid claim in part to this kid, that she is going to make sure that he gets some education around how to treat changelings, these half-bloods, or people who are not full-blooded fae. And she's just like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And they just like each other. And it's really fun to see them interact. And those are the main characters. This is actually why I liked this book, was Toby and then Quentin, and then watching them together. It just made me so happy. And that's why I was really happy. One of the big reasons I was really happy with this book. And then because I mentioned it in the last video, structure, like sentence structure, was just better. It was not quite so grating, I guess. It was just a lot easier to read. So it's much closer to what we get from Seanan McGuire now than what we got in the debut novel. It's still got a little ways to go before it is nicely polished Seanan McGuire type writing, but it's getting there. And then lastly, with the kind of structure, I did think the balance of the book was much better. So plot versus world building versus character development, all of these things, it was much, much more in balance, and than the first book was. The first book was kind of all over the place, depending on where you were. And this one, it just felt a lot better. As well as the other thing that I thought was much more balanced was things that are important for this book, and then things that are important for this series. I just think it was done a lot better. So overall, I really did actually like this book. I liked it a lot better than I have in the past, which is awesome. And I can't wait to continue on. But those are all my non-spoilery thoughts. So if you do not want to be spoiled for this book, you should go ahead and click away from this video now. Bye. Okay. So, I had a couple of spoilery thoughts for this book, and one of them was, I thought, just funny because I never catch foreshadowing. Like, a lot of foreshadowing I just don't see, but I did catch one this time, and I wrote it down, and it was like on page 246 of the mass market paperback edition that I have. Toby has a stray thought, And it was amazing anything had been able to go wrong. They should have had backups for the people too. And I was just like, yes, right on, Toby, you got it. You got it. And so it was just so funny. And then like really quickly afterwards, we got the clue that it was something about memory, but we didn't get the full explanation until 100 pages later. But it was like, it was so funny. I was just like, yes, yes, you've got it. You don't know you have it, but you have it. But I thought that was interesting. I really honestly, throughout this whole book, I just wanted to shake Jan and Elliot. And it was just like, you're purposefully leaving out information that would help her to solve this mystery. Really? Why are you doing that? Okay, I know why you're doing that, because you don't trust her, because you don't know that she's not a spy. But at the same time, like, people are dying. People are dying, and like, you're still going off by yourself, and you're not giving them all the information, and this is ridiculous. Really struggled with those choices that they made. But one thing I did think was really interesting to watch is just how Toby mothers the kids that are kind of around her. She very definitely has this idea that fairy is not kind to those that are ignorant, and so she tries to teach the kids as best as she can. She's very truthful and honest with them. She doesn't really sugarcoat it, but she's like, there are some hard lessons that you guys kind of need to learn. But the other thing that she does is when they need comfort, she offers it. She's holding April's hand at the end so that April can pretend that Toby's going to be her mother. I mean, it's so interesting. And this is actually why I like Toby so much in this book, because that's the kind of mother that I kind of tend towards, is like my own parenting style is to be very honest and these are hard lessons. Let me help you through them and offer comfort when it's needed. So it's like I connected with her a lot better than I have in the past, before I became a mother. And then the last thing for that's just spoilery for this book. It was so hard to read that ending, knowing that she failed. Jan died, so she failed. And she went to Sylvester and explained that this is what happened. And he was just like, you did your best, don't worry about it. And she's just like, my best wasn't good enough. And she cuts ties. She doesn't really talk to anybody. She takes multiple steps back on her recovery, and it was so hard to watch, knowing knowing exactly why she was doing it and understanding the instincts that she had. And I just, heartbreak, man. It was so hard. But I do think it was very well written. But that's the end of my kind of spoilery thoughts for this book. So I'm going to get into the spoilery stuff for this series. So if you don't want to be spoiled for the series, you should go ahead and click away from the video now. Bye. Okay, so the first thing that happened that just about also killed me is the phone call with the Loo Shack, right? Because Toby calls her and says, this is what's going on. I'm not going to see you for a while, maybe ever. Depends on if I die or not. Like, just wanted to let you know what's going on. And they have the conversation, and, the Loo Shack gives Toby a lot of advice. That is, of course, a lot of things that she really, needed to hear, and were very relevant. But one of the thing that killed me is in that conversation, the Loo Shack says, come back because I get to be the one that kills you. And I just wanted to cry, because they're becoming such good friends. They are family. They're going to become true family, not just by blood, but by choice. And when the Loo Shack speaks, it is the truth. She is required to speak the truth. I don't know if it's a geese or whatever is going on. I don't remember exactly. But she is required to speak the truth. So when she says, I'm going to kill you, by speaking it aloud, she makes it true. So she is going to be the one to kill Toby. And I'm just like, you guys, you are so dumb. Like, why would you do that to yourself, right? Why would you do that, Loo Shack? Why? And this is going to hurt so much more. And she mentions it off and on in the beginning, and then as they grow closer, she doesn't mention it until we get to the last book that just came out this last September, The Unkindest Tide. And Loo Shack is very sad as she says, I'm gonna be the one to kill you. And Toby says, I know. It was just like, oh, it just makes me cry. It's so, oh, like, again, I want to shake them. Like, why did you do that to yourself, right? And so, like, talking a little bit about the romance part of it, I am not on board with Connor. And so I have reasons why, and I can get into them if anybody's interested, but Connor is not my first choice. And so, like, seeing Connor and Toby kiss, I was just like, oh yeah, we're starting the romance for them. Whatever. It's going to be fine. He's going to die soon anyway. Like, which is so terrible of me. But at the same time, it's just like, I'm not into it. But at the same time, on the Tybalt romance front, it was so interesting to watch him because it reminds me of Anna and Kristoff from Frozen 2, where Kristoff shows up and is just like, I'm here. What do you need? And that is Tybalt, because Tybalt respects her intelligence, respects that this is what she's going to do, that this is who she is. She's going to do the right thing. How can I help you do the right thing? What you think is the right thing, right? So even when, like, Toby's just like, I need you to be a bloodhound. Go sniff out this thing. And he's just like, this is seriously below my dignity, but okay. And he does it for her. And like, he's so protective, and he almost like rips apart people. Like, he's just, oh, it's so interesting to compare and contrast Connor and Tybalt. And especially in this particular book where, and I think the next one is also a really good example of like the difference of personalities there. But like, just, it's so interesting. And speaking of Tybalt, of course, that resurrection is when Tybalt realizes she could not possibly be Dunya Shea. If she was, she would not have been able to do that resurrection. So of course, between this book and the next book, he does go track down Amandine and is like, WTF, why are you saying this? That this is what the race that you are when you clearly are not, because your daughter has weird traits that could not possibly be Dunya Shea. So it's really interesting to kind of see that and like realize that he knows way before she does. And then lastly, we got another example of how Amandine feels about Toby. That I don't know why, but she always kind of wanted her to be mortal, I guess. So like, we saw in the first book, the first major clue was Amy crying at Toby's changeling choice when she chose fairy. And then we see it in this one in an offhand comment that Toby makes to Quentin. Mom always used to dress me to highlight my mortality. I was just like, oh my gosh. So I love the little bits and pieces that we get about the relationship between Amandine and Toby. And we still haven't resolved that whole thing. I'm really intrigued to see how it gets resolved eventually. But I like seeing the little bits and pieces. Seanan McGuire is really good at this. So just laying little bits and pieces of details that you can go back and find on a reread, which is part of why I'm rereading it. But that is it, guys. I enjoyed this book so much more than I have in the past. I'm really happy with that. It was a solid book. The next book is not my favorite. I don't love fairies who steal children. Okay, like let's get it out there. I don't love fairies who steal children. So not my favorite book, but I am excited to kind of reread it for all the other aspects of it. And if I'm keeping on schedule, you should see it appear in my videos in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So that's it, you guys. Let me know have you read this book? What do you think of it? Are you like me and just didn't really like Connor? Are you like me and really didn't like the whole of the company of ALH? Let me know down below. But that's it, you guys. So until next time, have happy reading, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.